"If you play Chopin, I'll marry you." The words, spoken by Richard Langford, the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation, bounced around the room like careless laughter. Everyone chuckled. Crystal glasses filled with champagne clinked. The grand piano in the corner, polished and untouched, gleamed under the golden lights of the lounge. It was supposed to be a joke, a throwaway line meant to impress his guests. But in the shadows, standing by with a mop and bucket, was Daniel. And those words didn't sound like a joke to him. They sounded like a door he had once closed, a dream he had once buried, suddenly creaking open. Daniel was the janitor. For 10 years, he had been the man who swept up crumbs after corporate parties, who wiped down expensive windows that never reflected him back. He was invisible to most, background noise in a world that valued shiny suits and boardroom deals. Yet beneath his tired eyes and work-worn hands lived a secret. Daniel had once been a musician. Not just any musician, he had been a pianist who lived and breathed Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Beethoven. Music had been his heartbeat, the only way he knew how to make sense of the world. But life had a cruel way of silencing melodies. His mother, who had been his greatest supporter, died when he was barely in his 20s. Bills piled high, the apartment rent overdue, and the small upright piano his mother bought secondhand was sold to cover food. One job became another, and eventually, music slipped from his hands like sand he couldn't hold. He built walls around that dream, convincing himself that survival was enough. That sweeping floors was better than starving. So when Richard sneered at him from across the lounge and asked, "What about you, janitor? Do you think you can play Chopin?" the room exploded in laughter. But Daniel didn't laugh. He didn't look away. He set his mop aside, walked toward the piano, and said quietly, "Yes." The lounge fell still. Some guests leaned back, smirking, expecting a disaster. Others exchanged glances, already preparing to laugh harder when the janitor fumbled. Richard folded his arms, certain this would be entertaining. Daniel sat at the piano bench. His fingers hovered over the keys, trembling, not from fear of the people around him, but from the weight of memories. He remembered his mother's gentle voice, whispering as he practiced at night, "Play as though your heart is speaking, Daniel. Let the music say what words cannot." With a deep breath, he began. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major floated into the room. They were fragile at first, like a whisper breaking through silence. Then they grew, tender, haunting, full of longing. Daniel closed his eyes, and suddenly the world disappeared. He wasn't in a corporate lounge surrounded by mocking faces. He was a boy again, sitting in a dim apartment, his mother listening with her eyes closed, swaying gently to the music. The laughter stopped. The champagne glasses were lowered. The air grew heavy, thick with something unexplainable. Each note seemed to carry a lifetime, loss, hope, love, and pain. Some guests felt their throats tighten. One woman blinked rapidly, hiding tears behind her glass. Even Richard, who had built his empire on pride and arrogance, felt something stirring in his chest, a discomfort he couldn't name. When the last note faded, silence lingered. No one moved. No one breathed. Daniel opened his eyes slowly, his hands still resting on the keys. For a moment, the room wasn't divided by wealth or power or uniforms. It was simply full of human beings who had been reminded what it meant to feel. Richard cleared his throat, trying to regain control. Where did you learn to play like that?" His voice lacked its usual authority. Daniel looked at him, not with anger, not with pride, but with quiet strength. "In a small apartment, on a piano that barely held together. My mother used to sit beside me. She said music could heal what life breaks. She was right." No one laughed anymore. The arrogance of the challenge had turned into a mirror that reflected everyone's smallness. Richard found himself unable to mock. For the first time, the man who thought money could buy everything realized he had just witnessed something priceless. He said nothing more that night. But he didn't forget. The story of the janitor who played Chopin spread through the company like wildfire. Employees whispered about it in break rooms. Videos secretly recorded on phones circulated, reaching beyond the office walls into the city itself. Suddenly, Daniel wasn't invisible anymore. People stopped him in the halls. They asked about his music. They treated him with respect. But Daniel didn't let it swell his pride. He still cleaned the floors, still whistled softly as he pushed his mop bucket. Yet inside, something had shifted. A door had reopened. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to dream again. At night, after work, he found a small community center with an old piano in the corner. The keys were chipped, the sound uneven, but it was music. And he played, sometimes until dawn, pouring out everything he had locked away. One evening, Richard came to find him there. He stood quietly by the door, watching Daniel play. When the piece ended, Richard stepped forward, his voice softer than before. "You don't belong with a mop in your hands. You belong here, teaching, inspiring. I have a charity foundation. We work with underprivileged children. They need someone like you. Someone who can remind them that talent isn't about wealth, but about heart. Be our music director." Daniel stared at him, stunned. "I'm just a janitor," he whispered. Richard shook his head. "No. You're proof that greatness can be hidden in plain sight. You silenced a room full of people with nothing but a piano. Don't waste that." Tears pricked Daniel's eyes. It wasn't about a job offer. It was about being seen. For the first time in decades, someone looked at him and didn't see a uniform. They saw his soul. And with trembling hands, he nodded. Weeks turned into months. Daniel's life transformed. He taught children who had never touched an instrument before. He listened to their laughter, their struggles, their dreams. He gave them what his mother had once given him, hope wrapped in music. Some of the kids came from broken homes, from poverty, from pain. But in the music room, they were free. And Daniel played alongside them, his heart lighter than it had ever been. One day, during a small recital at the foundation, Richard sat in the front row. He watched as children, shy, timid, but glowing, played their first hesitant pieces. And when Daniel sat at the piano to close the evening with Chopin once more, Richard found himself standing, applauding with real humility. The careless challenge that began as a joke had transformed into something none of them could have predicted. Richard had learned that power wasn't in wealth, but in the ability to recognize and nurture true talent. Daniel had learned that dreams don't die, they wait, quietly, for the right moment to be reborn. And the children, wide-eyed and hopeful, learned that even if the world overlooks you, your gift can still shine. That night, as Daniel walked home, he looked up at the stars and whispered, "I kept playing, Mom. I never stopped." And for the first time in a long time, he felt her there, smiling. The story would be told again and again, sometimes twisted into legend. "If you play Chopin, I'll marry you." The janitor's response silenced the CEO. But at its core, it remained a reminder that dignity, beauty, and greatness often live quietly in the hearts of those the world ignores. And when they finally step into the light, they change everything.